Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling small, confused, or guilty, even though you didn't do anything wrong? You can't quite explain it, but something in that exchange felt off. You replay it in your head, wondering if you overreacted, if you were too harsh, or maybe, just maybe, you really were the problem. That's what control looks like when it's invisible, quiet, polite, and expertly disguised as care. Most people think control looks loud, someone yelling, threatening, dominating a room. But the most dangerous kind doesn't raise its voice. It smiles, it sympathizes, it says things like, "I'm only saying this because I care about you," or "You used to be so different." It slips under your skin and makes you question your reality one subtle comment at a time. You don't notice it right away because it doesn't come with red flags. It comes with soft words, gentle tones, and moments of affection perfectly timed to make you doubt your instincts. And before you know it, you've started apologizing for things you didn't do, explaining yourself for choices that don't need approval, and walking on eggshells in a relationship that feels strangely heavy. That's how control hides, not through force, but through confusion. The truth is, there are people out there who have mastered the art of quiet manipulation. They use your empathy, your kindness, and your need for connection against you. They twist your strengths into leashes and call it love. They don't take your freedom. You hand it over, piece by piece, thinking it's the right thing to do. And it's not always the obvious villains. Sometimes it's the friend who needs constant reassurance, the partner who sulks when you set boundaries, the coworker who flatters you when they need something and withdraws when you don't comply. Sometimes it's even family, the ones who remind you how much they've sacrificed just to make sure you never forget what you owe them. What makes these behaviors so dangerous is that they don't look toxic on the surface. They're dressed in emotional camouflage, kindness, concern, loyalty, but underneath, they're all about control, about power, about keeping you in a box where you're predictable, agreeable, and easy to manage. Here's the hard truth most people don't want to face. Control doesn't always come from bad people. It often comes from insecure ones. People who can't manage their own emotions, so they try to manage yours. People who are terrified of losing power, so they use fear, guilt, or praise to keep you close. People who crave certainty so much that they'd rather shrink your world than face their own chaos. And here's where it gets personal, because this kind of control doesn't just steal your choices, it rewires your sense of self. You start editing your words before you speak. You second-guess your feelings, you stop trusting your instincts. That's how deep it goes. Manipulation doesn't just control your actions, it controls your identity. The worst part? Most people living under that kind of influence don't even know it's happening. They think they're keeping the peace, being kind, being understanding. Well, what they're really doing is surrendering piece by piece until they wake up one day, realizing they've lost their own voice. This speech isn't about blaming others. It's about waking up. It's about seeing what's really happening beneath the surface of words, gestures, and emotional games. It's about learning to recognize the behaviors that seem harmless, but are actually designed to keep you small, quiet, and dependent. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you recognize manipulation for what it is, for performance, not authenticity, you take back control. You stop explaining yourself. You stop negotiating your boundaries. You stop living your life according to someone else's emotional script. And that's the moment the power dynamic flips. Not when they change, but when you do. When you stop playing a role in their silent game of control and start owning your energy again. So if you've ever felt drained by a relationship you can't explain, guilty for saying no, or confused by someone who always seems to twist reality just enough to make you doubt yourself, stay right here. Because we're going to break down every subtle psychological trick toxic people use to control you without you even realizing it. And more importantly, how to stop it before it ever starts. Control rarely begins with something obvious. It doesn't announce itself with shouting threats or ultimatums. It starts quietly, with small comments, subtle shifts, gentle pressures that don't seem dangerous at first. It creeps in through tone, timing, and emotional cues that slowly reshape how you think, feel, and respond. The most effective control isn't forced on you, it's handed over by you without realizing it. You might think manipulation only exists in toxic relationships or abusive environments, but it happens everywhere. In families, friendships, workplaces, even in casual interactions. It's when someone learns how to push your emotional buttons to get what they want, while convincing you it's what you want too. It's when they make you doubt your instincts, so you start trusting their judgment over your own. And it's when they shift your focus from truth to approval, when you stop asking, is this right for me? And start asking, will they be upset if I say no? That's the invisible chain. Control disguised as care. The kind that makes you believe compliance is kindness, silence is respect, and self-sacrifice is love. It's the friend who says, I'm just trying to help, but their help always comes with strings attached. It's the coworker who constantly jokes about your mistakes, making you laugh along while secretly feeling smaller every time. It's the partner who praises you when you agree but withdraws when you assert yourself. What makes these behaviors so powerful is their subtlety. You can't point to a single moment and say, that's when it started. Because manipulation doesn't happen in a storm, it happens in drips. A comment here, a guilt trip there, a moment of withdrawal that leaves you unsettled. They test your boundaries like a locksmith, testing tumblers, finding exactly what makes the lock turn. It begins with something small. Maybe they question your choices under the guise of concern. Are you sure that's a good idea? You really think you can handle that? They say it with a smile, maybe even a laugh, but the message lands. You need my input to make good decisions. Then they reinforce it with validation when you comply. I knew you'd come around. That's not advice. That's conditioning. And you start to adapt. Not because you're weak, but because humans crave harmony. You want peace. You want connection. So you bend a little, you soften your tone, you say yes when you mean maybe. It feels easier than conflict. But every time you bend for peace, you lose a small piece of your independence. And that's exactly how subtle control thrives, not through confrontation, but through quiet compliance. The hardest part is that manipulative control often hides behind intentions. They'll say, I just care about you. I only want what's best. They might even believe that themselves. But genuine care supports your autonomy. It doesn't suppress it. Real love doesn't shrink you to make itself comfortable. It doesn't guilt you into silence. It doesn't make you question your reality. If someone's concern leaves you feeling powerless, confused, or guilty, it's not care, it's control in disguise. This type of control is psychological. It's not about dominating your body or your schedule. It's about managing your emotions. It's when someone learns to read your emotional triggers so precisely that they can predict your response before you do. They know when you'll say yes, when you'll cave, when you'll back down. It's not magic, it's pattern recognition. You've shown them your empathy, your loyalty, your need for harmony, and they've learned how to use those qualities against you. One of the most common tactics of subtle manipulation is what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. It's when someone alternates between affection and withdrawal to keep you uncertain. They're warm and loving one moment, cold and distant the next. That unpredictability keeps you hooked. You start working harder for their approval, hoping to earn back their warmth. And without realizing it, you're no longer acting freely. You're performing for their validation. You see this dynamic everywhere. In relationships where one partner constantly shifts between praise and criticism, in workplaces where a boss alternates between recognition and humiliation, even in families where love feels conditional on obedience. The message is always the same. You are safe, valued, and loved. Only when you behave the way I want. That's not connection. That's control. The most skilled manipulators rarely raise their voice or show anger. Instead, they create doubt. They say things like, I never said that, or you're too sensitive, or you're imagining things. Those aren't just dismissive comments. They're reality rewrites. They make you question your memory, your perception, even your sanity. Once you start doubting your own mind, you'll cling to theirs for clarity. And that's when they own you emotionally. Here's something most people never realize. Control doesn't always come from strength. It often comes from fear. People who manipulate others are usually terrified of losing power, of being abandoned, of facing their own insecurities. So instead of dealing with their fear, they try to manage yours. They pull your emotional strings to keep themselves safe. It's not strength, it's weakness hiding behind dominance. When you start recognizing these behaviors, everything changes. The fog lifts. You start noticing the patterns you used to excuse. The guilt trips, the passive-aggressive comments, the strategic silences. You begin to see the manipulation for what it is. Not love, not care, not connection. Control. And the moment you name it, it starts to lose power. Because awareness is the first step to freedom. You can't break free from what you can't see. Once you recognize that the discomfort you feel around certain people isn't your fault, but a symptom of manipulation, you stop internalizing it. You stop apologizing for being uncomfortable. You start trusting your intuition again, that quiet signal inside you that says, something about this doesn't feel right. That voice is your truth trying to break through the noise. The key is not to fight manipulation with aggression, but with clarity. You don't need to match their energy. You don't need to prove your innocence or explain your intentions. You simply observe. You see their pattern, you stay calm, and you refuse to play your part in it. Because manipulation only works when you engage with it. Once you stop responding the way they expect, the power dynamic collapses. Recognizing subtle control isn't about becoming paranoid or distrusting everyone. It's about understanding human behavior, yours and others. It's about learning where influence ends and manipulation begins. Healthy influence inspires choice. Toxic influence removes it. Healthy connection builds confidence. Toxic connection builds dependency. The invisible chains of control are made of assumptions, guilt, and self-doubt. But the moment you see them, they shatter. Awareness cuts through manipulation like light through fog. You begin to see the truth clearly. No one controls you unless you let them. And from that clarity comes something more powerful than revenge or confrontation. Freedom. Freedom to think for yourself. To feel without apology. To walk away when peace costs too much. That's how you take back control. Not by fighting louder, but by seeing clearer. Because once you see the invisible, it can't control you anymore. Guilt is one of the most powerful emotions a person can feel. And manipulators know it. They know guilt can bend even the strongest person, silence the boldest voice, and convince you to give up your power willingly. They don't need to shout, threaten, or demand. All they have to do is make you feel bad for standing up for yourself. Guilt is their invisible weapon, precise, emotional, and devastatingly effective. You see, guilt tripping doesn't happen by accident. It's strategic. It's the art of turning your compassion into a leash. It works best on people who are kind, loyal, and empathetic. People who care about others' feelings, who want to do right by those they love. The manipulator spots that empathy like radar. They know you can't stand the thought of hurting someone, disappointing someone, or being misunderstood. So they use that, not by asking directly for what they want, but by making you feel guilty for not giving it to them. It starts with subtle phrases. After everything I've done for you, you've changed. Wow, I didn't think you'd treat me like this. They don't say, do what I want. They say, I can't believe you're doing this to me. And suddenly you're not defending your decision anymore. You're defending your character. You're no longer focused on what's right. You're trying to prove you're not selfish, ungrateful, or cold. That's how guilt tripping traps you. It shifts the conversation from behavior to morality. And that's the brilliance of it. It doesn't force you to obey. It convinces you that obedience is the decent thing to do. You walk away thinking you made a choice, when really, you made a sacrifice. They've made you feel like the villain for protecting your peace. They've flipped the story so perfectly that you're the one apologizing even when they're the one crossing the line. Guilt tripping thrives in relationships where there's emotional history. Parents use it with their children. After all I've done for you, this is how you repay me. Partners use it. I guess you don't love me anymore. Friends use it. I was there for you and now you can't even do this one thing for me. It's always the same formula. They take something that was given freely, love, time, effort, and turn it into currency, a debt you never agreed to owe. But the most dangerous guilt doesn't come from obvious manipulation. It comes from emotional subtlety. From the sighs, the silences, the withdrawn energy that makes you feel like you did something wrong. They don't have to say anything. They just act hurt. They withhold warmth, connection, or approval until you give in. That's emotional blackmail, not always loud, but incredibly effective. It conditions you to associate peace with compliance. You start thinking, if I just do what they want, maybe things will go back to normal. That's not peace. That's captivity disguised as comfort. Here's the harsh truth. Guilt tripping works because it preys on good intentions. Manipulators know decent people don't want to hurt others, so they use your decency against you. They make you believe that protecting yourself means betraying them. And the more you care, the easier it is to control you. Because guilt makes you trade truth for harmony, integrity for approval, and freedom for acceptance. Over time, guilt becomes your emotional reflex. You start anticipating disappointment before it even happens. You edit your words, over-explain your choices, apologize for taking space, not because anyone asked you to, but because you've been trained to. You're living inside an emotional loop. Fear of hurting others, relief when they're pleased, shame when they're not. That's how subtle control rewires you. It teaches you to police yourself on their behalf. And it doesn't just cost you peace, it costs you authenticity. When you make decisions from guilt, you're no longer living from truth. You're living from fear, fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as the bad one. But here's the thing, guilt isn't proof you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it's proof you're finally doing something right. Manipulative people have trained you to equate boundaries with cruelty, independence with betrayal, and self-respect with selfishness. But that's their narrative, not yours. The moment you start setting healthy boundaries, guilt will come knocking. That's normal. It's the echo of your old conditioning. It's the discomfort that comes from reclaiming power you were taught to surrender. But guilt is just an emotion. It's not a compass. You can feel it and still do what's right for you. You don't have to fight guilt. You just have to stop obeying it. There's a phrase I want you to remember. Guilt is not love. It's emotional debt collection. Real love doesn't make you prove your loyalty through sacrifice. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't say you owe me. It gives freely. It communicates honestly. It respects boundaries, even when it doesn't benefit from them. Guilt, on the other hand, is love's counterfeit. It mimics care to gain control. It uses emotion to manipulate action. So how do you recognize guilt tripping before it traps you? Pay attention to how you feel after an interaction. Do you feel drained, small, or uneasy, like you've done something wrong without knowing why? Do you find yourself defending your choices when no one asked for an explanation? Do you feel responsible for someone else's emotions? Those are warning signs. Healthy relationships leave you with clarity. Manipulative ones leave you with confusion. When you sense guilt tripping, resist the instinct to over-explain. The more you defend yourself, the more power you give away. Simply state your boundary and stop talking. I understand you're upset, but my decision stands. That's it. No justifying, no apologizing. You're not responsible for managing their emotions. You're responsible for managing your integrity. When they say you've changed, understand that's not always an insult. It often means you've stopped being easy to control. When they say, I guess you don't care anymore, remember, caring doesn't mean compliance. And when they act hurt because you said no, don't backtrack. Let them be uncomfortable. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Freedom begins the moment you stop mistaking guilt for morality. When you learn to sit with guilt instead of reacting to it, you take your power back. You start making choices based on truth, not emotional manipulation. And little by little, the people who depended on your guilt lose their grip on you, because guilt only controls those who fear it. You can still love people deeply and refuse to be controlled by them. You can still be kind without being compliant. True strength isn't the absence of guilt. It's the ability to feel it and move forward anyway. The next time someone tries to make you feel bad for doing what's right for you, take a deep breath and remind yourself, I am not here to live under emotional debt. I owe no one my peace. Because the people who truly care about you won't weaponize your empathy. They'll protect it. They won't manipulate your kindness. They'll honor it. The ones who need guilt to control you will fade, because manipulation can't survive around awareness. So when guilt shows up again, as it will, don't see it as a sign you're wrong. See it as proof you're evolving, proof you're learning to live from strength instead of fear, proof that you've stopped letting others write the story of who you're supposed to be. That's what it means to be free, to do what's right for you, even when guilt tries to hold you back. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious and dangerous forms of psychological control. It doesn't just manipulate how you feel, it manipulates how you perceive reality itself. It makes you question your memory, your intuition, even your sanity. It's not about making you believe a lie, it's about making you doubt the truth. Because once you doubt your own mind, you become easy to control. You start needing the manipulator to tell you what's real. Gaslighting doesn't start with a loud argument or an obvious lie. It starts quietly with small contradictions, subtle dismissals, and carefully placed seeds of doubt. Maybe you point out something that hurt you, and they say, "That never happened." Or you recall a conversation clearly, and they reply, "You're remembering it wrong." You might bring up how you feel, and they smirk, "You're too sensitive." And at first you think maybe they're right. Maybe you did misunderstand. That's how it begins. The goal of gaslighting isn't to convince you of their version of events right away. It's to slowly erode your confidence in your own perception. Bit by bit, they chip away at your certainty. You start second-guessing yourself, editing your emotions, doubting your instincts. Over time, the manipulator becomes your compass, the person you check in with to confirm what's true, what's real, what's okay to feel. And that's when they have you. Because when someone else becomes the authority over your reality, you're no longer free. What makes gaslighting so dangerous is that it's gradual. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow distortion that feels almost invisible while it's happening. The manipulator might mix truth with lies to keep you off balance. They might say, "I never said that. But if I did, it wasn't like that." Or you're imagining things, you always overreact. Each denial doesn't just erase the event, it rewires your memory. You start thinking, maybe I am exaggerating. Maybe I am too emotional. And when you begin to doubt yourself, they win. Not because they proved you wrong, but because they made you stop trusting your own mind. That's the ultimate form of control. Here's the genius and evil behind gaslighting. It's disguised as reason. The manipulator often appears calm, logical, even patient, while you're the one getting emotional and defensive. They'll look at you and say things like, "See how irrational you're being right now." And in that moment, you start believing you're the problem. That's their goal. They want you so tangled in self-doubt that you can't even see the manipulation happening. Gaslighting isn't limited to romantic relationships. It happens in families, workplaces, and friendships too. A boss might dismiss your valid concerns as overreacting. A parent might rewrite childhood events to protect their own image. A friend might twist your words until you start apologizing for something you didn't do. It's always the same pattern: denial, distortion, and deflection. Sometimes gaslighting isn't even verbal, it's behavioral. They may act like everything's fine after they hurt you, making you feel dramatic for still being upset. They might change the subject every time you try to discuss something uncomfortable, forcing you to question whether it's worth bringing up again. Over time, you stop confronting them. You stop speaking up. You stop trusting your emotions, and that silence becomes their victory. What's especially cruel about gaslighting is that it isolates you. You begin to think no one else will understand because the manipulator has made you feel like your feelings are too much. They may even tell others you're unstable or emotional. So when you finally speak out, you're not believed. That's not an accident, that's part of the design. The goal isn't just to confuse you, it's to destroy your credibility. But here's the truth gaslighters fear most. Reality doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. Facts don't disappear just because someone denies them. Your emotions are real. Your memories are real. Your intuition is real. Even if someone tries to make you think otherwise. The first step to breaking free from gaslighting is to trust your gut again. That small, quiet voice inside that says, something's not right here. Don't dismiss it. That's your internal alarm system. The part of you that still recognizes truth. The reason gaslighting works is because it teaches you to silence that voice. To break the spell, you have to start listening to it again, even when it contradicts what the manipulator is saying. Next, start documenting reality. Privately, safely. Write things down. Keep a record of what was said and when. Not because you need proof for them, but because you need to remind yourself what actually happened. Gaslighters thrive in the fog of confusion. Clarity is their enemy. When you have facts in front of you, their lies start losing power. And most importantly, stop engaging in arguments designed to distort your truth. Gaslighters don't argue to reach understanding. They argue to dominate perception. They twist words, change topics, and project blame. You can't win that game because it's not played in good faith. The only way to win is not to play. When they deny, you don't need to prove. When they twist, you don't need to untangle. You simply hold your ground and exit the conversation. You might think walking away means losing. It doesn't. Walking away means reclaiming control over your mental space. The manipulator feeds off your confusion, your silence starves them. The hardest part about escaping gaslighting isn't leaving the person, it's learning to trust yourself again afterward. Because the damage runs deep. Even after the manipulator is gone, their voice lingers in your head. You start questioning your feelings. Am I overreacting? Am I being too sensitive? That's the residue of gaslighting. It's like a shadow that keeps whispering doubt long after the light has returned. But that voice fades the more you act on your truth. Every time you choose to trust your perception over their distortion, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Every time you say, no, that's not what happened, you rebuild your confidence. Every time you refuse to apologize for your emotions, you take your reality back. Gaslighting doesn't end with confrontation. It ends with awareness. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you understand how it works, it loses its magic. And when you stop explaining, justifying, or defending your truth, you become untouchable. Remember this, clarity is your weapon. Calm is your armor. Truth is your freedom. You don't need to convince anyone of your reality. You just need to stop letting them rewrite it. The most powerful thing you can say to a gaslighter is nothing at all. Because silence in that moment isn't weakness, it's sovereignty. It's the quiet declaration that you no longer live in someone else's version of reality. You live in your own. You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. You're not too emotional. You're waking up. And that awakening, that moment when you finally say, I know what I felt. I know what I saw. I know who I am, is when the spell of manipulation breaks forever. The nice person trap is one of the most subtle yet powerful forms of manipulation in existence. It doesn't look like control. It doesn't sound like aggression. It comes wrapped in politeness, charm, and smiles. It whispers instead of shout. It convinces you that the safest way to live, the most moral way to exist, is to always be nice, even when that niceness costs you your peace, your boundaries, and your truth. Being a good person is beautiful, but being a too nice person, the kind who can't say no, who fears being disliked, who swallows anger to keep the peace, that's a cage disguised as virtue, because manipulators, toxic people, and emotional predators don't target the cruel or the cold. They target the kind. They study kindness, learn its weaknesses, and then weaponize it. It starts innocently. You're taught from a young age to be polite, to be agreeable, to avoid conflict. You learn that being liked means being safe. And when someone disrespects you, you're told to take the high road. You internalize the belief that good people forgive, stay quiet, and never make others uncomfortable. But what no one tells you is that manipulative people see that behavior not as kindness, but as opportunity. They can spot it instantly. That need to please, that fear of conflict, that desperate hope to be seen as good. And once they sense it, they start shaping your behavior. They test your boundaries with small requests, minor guilt trips, harmless favors. You comply because you want to be helpful, supportive, considerate. But slowly their asks turn into expectations. And suddenly saying no feels like betrayal. The nice person trap works because it uses your goodness against you. You're conditioned to believe that standing up for yourself makes you selfish, that being assertive makes you rude, that prioritizing your own needs makes you unkind. So you keep giving. You give time, energy, forgiveness, until there's nothing left. And the people around you keep taking, because you've taught them they can't. But here's the painful truth. Being endlessly nice doesn't make you kind. It makes you complicit. Every time you let someone cross your boundaries to keep them happy, you're teaching them it's okay to disrespect you. Every time you laugh off a hurtful comment to avoid drama, you're protecting their comfort at the expense of your dignity. Every time you stay silent when you should speak up, you're not being kind, you're being controlled. Manipulators adore nice people because nice people are predictable. They won't fight back. They'll rationalize mistreatment. They'll say things like, they didn't mean it that way, or I don't want to make a scene. They'll choose peace even if it's fake peace over discomfort. That predictability gives the manipulator power. They can twist guilt, play the victim, or act wounded, and the nice person will rush to fix it, to smooth things over, to restore harmony. What makes this trap so dangerous is that it feels moral. You tell yourself, I'm doing the right thing by being understanding. But deep down, you feel uneasy, resentful, drained. Because kindness without boundaries isn't goodness. It's self-abandonment. Let's be clear. Genuine kindness comes from strength. It's a choice, not a compulsion. But fake kindness, the kind rooted in fear, comes from weakness disguised as virtue. It's the belief that love must be earned, that respect must be traded for obedience, that your worth depends on keeping everyone else happy. That's not kindness. That's emotional slavery. And it's not just external conditioning, it's internal programming. Somewhere along the line, you started believing that conflict equals danger. Maybe you grew up in a household where speaking up got you punished. Maybe you learned early that your emotions were too much. So you adapted, you smiled, agreed, complied. You learned that invisibility was safety. But now, as an adult, that same survival strategy keeps you trapped. You can't build healthy relationships from fear, because fear-driven niceness doesn't create love, it creates dependence. You start molding yourself to fit what others want, and in the process, you lose who you are. You start apologizing for existing. You start feeling invisible, unseen, because you've taught people that your needs don't matter. The nice person trap also thrives in the workplace. You take on extra work to be a team player. You stay late because you don't want to disappoint. You let credit for your ideas go to someone else because you don't want to cause tension. And while others advance, you burn out in silence, praised for your reliability, but forgotten for your value. The same pattern plays out in relationships. You bite your tongue to avoid an argument. You downplay your feelings to keep the peace. You forgive behavior that breaks you because they didn't mean it. But niceness won't save a toxic dynamic. It only sustains it. Because people who respect you don't need to be managed with silence. Here's the truth. The world doesn't need more nice people. It needs real people. People who can be kind and honest, compassionate and strong, loving and firm. You can have a good heart and still say no. You can be forgiving without being foolish. You can be respectful without being a doormat. The moment you realize that being liked is not the same as being respected, Everything changes. You stop chasing approval and start demanding alignment. You stop fearing disapproval because you understand that anyone who withdraws love when you set boundaries never offered love, they offered control. Being nice won't protect you from manipulation. It will attract it. The people who truly care about you don't want your compliance. They want your authenticity. They want your truth. Even when it's uncomfortable, they want you to speak up, to stand firm, to show up as your full self. So if you've spent your life trying to be nice, trying not to upset anyone, trying to please everyone, understand this: you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to shrink to be accepted. You don't have to say yes to earn love. You can still smile, still be kind, still have empathy, but from strength, not fear. The difference is power. Niceness seeks approval. Kindness speaks truth. Niceness avoids conflict. Kindness faces it with grace. Niceness gives to be accepted. Kindness gives because it's who you are. And when you start living from that truth, manipulators will fall away. They won't be able to use guilt, shame, or fake praise to control you anymore. They'll call you cold or selfish because you're no longer easy to manipulate. That's fine. Let them. Their opinion was never love. It was leverage. You don't owe the world endless politeness. You owe yourself honesty. Because being a good person doesn't mean being a silent one. It means standing up for yourself with integrity, even when your voice shakes. It means understanding that real kindness has boundaries. So stop apologizing for your strength. Stop mistaking silence for peace. Stop believing that saying no makes you unkind. The truth is, the most powerful, compassionate, and authentic thing you can ever do is stop being nice and start being real. Taking back control doesn't happen in one dramatic moment of defiance. It doesn't happen in a single speech, a single boundary, or a single confrontation. It happens slowly, through small acts of self-respect that build on each other until one day you realize something powerful: you no longer need anyone's permission to be free. Emotional freedom begins the moment you stop letting other people dictate how you feel, what you believe, and who you become. It's when you decide that your peace is worth more than approval, that your truth is worth more than comfort, and that your energy belongs to you, not to those who manipulate, guilt, or diminish you. It's not easy, because control isn't just something others impose, it's something we learn to accept. You were taught to doubt yourself, to stay small, to please everyone but yourself. Taking back control means unlearning that conditioning and stepping into your own power, one decision at a time. The first step to reclaiming emotional freedom is awareness. You can't take back what you don't realize has been taken. For years, maybe decades, you might have believed that the exhaustion you feel was just being nice, that your anxiety was just overthinking, that your silence was just avoiding drama. But when you finally see the pattern, the manipulation, the guilt, the emotional games, something inside you shifts. You start seeing how often you've lived your life reacting to others instead of creating it for yourself. And awareness, as small as it seems, is the first crack in the wall of control. But awareness alone isn't enough. Because once you see the truth, the real work begins. The work of choosing yourself in moments where you used to surrender. It's saying no when your voice shakes. It's not responding when someone tries to bait you into defending your worth. It's walking away from conversations that only exist to drain you. Taking back control means realizing you can't change other people. You can only change how you respond to them. That's emotional power. And it's quieter than you think. It's not about shouting or proving or fighting to be understood. It's about being so rooted in who you are that you no longer need to explain your value to anyone. It's understanding that your peace doesn't require justification. When you stop chasing external validation, everything changes. The manipulator's tricks stop working. The guilt trips lose their sting. The emotional games stop being interesting. Because you no longer crave their approval, you crave your own. That's when you become unpredictable to those who once controlled you. They can no longer push your buttons, because you've learned to disconnect them. Taking back control also means facing a truth that many people avoid. You have to take responsibility for your part in the dynamic. That doesn't mean taking blame for being mistreated. Never. It means recognizing where you allowed disrespect because you were afraid of losing someone. It means owning the moments when you silenced yourself to keep peace, even when it tore you apart inside. You can't heal what you won't take ownership of. And taking ownership isn't about shame. It's about power. Because once you accept that you had the power to allow it, you also realize you have the power to stop it. Emotional freedom is about creating internal stability in a world that thrives on emotional chaos. It's about knowing that peace doesn't mean avoiding people. It means mastering your reactions to them. It's about realizing that detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. You stop needing to convince, to fix, to rescue, to chase. You stop taking things personally because you understand that people act from their own wounds, not your worth. To reclaim your emotional freedom, you must learn to say no, not just to others, but to yourself. No to overthinking. No to emotional overexertion. No to reliving the same pain on repeat. You must learn to protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. Every time you choose peace over proving a point, you strengthen your self-control. Every time you walk away from manipulation instead of trying to explain your side, you reclaim another piece of your power. Sometimes taking back control means walking away entirely from the relationship, the friendship, the job, the environment that keeps you small. That's not failure, that's freedom. You don't owe loyalty to people who thrive on your silence. You don't owe explanation to anyone who twists your words to keep you submissive. You owe yourself the life you've been delaying in the name of being understanding. But freedom isn't just about leaving others, it's also about returning to yourself. It's about rebuilding the trust you lost in your own instincts. For so long, you may have ignored that quiet voice inside, the one that warned you when something felt off. You buried it under guilt, under politeness, under fear. Taking back control means listening to that voice again. It's learning to trust your body, your emotions, your intuition. That voice is your compass, and when you start following it again, life gets clearer, lighter, calmer. Emotional freedom also requires forgiveness. Not for them, but for you. Forgiveness doesn't mean you excuse what happened. It means you stop letting it define you. You stop giving your past the authority to shape your present. You let go of the resentment that keeps you tied to people who no longer deserve your energy. Because every ounce of anger you carry is a chain that binds you to them. Freedom means cutting that chain. And here's something powerful. The moment you reclaim your emotional independence, people will notice. Some will admire it. Others will resent it. Those who benefited from your compliance will call you selfish, difficult, or cold. But that's how you know you're growing. Growth threatens those who prefer you. Small. But your job isn't to stay small for their comfort. Your job is to rise unapologetically. Taking back control doesn't mean you become hardened or detached. It means you become selective about where your energy goes, who gets access to your heart, and how you respond to life. It means living on your terms. It's not rebellion, it's self-respect. The journey to emotional freedom is a process. You'll stumble, doubt yourself, even feel guilty at first. That's okay, you're breaking old patterns, and that's uncomfortable. But every time you choose self-respect over self-sacrifice, you strengthen your emotional muscles. Every time you stay calm instead of reacting, you remind yourself that peace is your superpower. Because in the end, freedom isn't about control over others. It's about mastery over yourself. It's the ability to say, I decide what gets my energy. I decide what affects my mood. I decide who stays and who goes. That's real power. No manipulator, no gaslighter, no guilt tripper can touch you once you reach that state. Because they can only control what you're afraid to lose. And when you realize your peace, your truth, your self-respect, those are things no one can take from you. You become unstoppable. So take a deep breath. Stand tall. Stop chasing validation. Stop apologizing for boundaries. Stop shrinking to fit in places that can't hold your growth. You don't need permission to take back your power. You just need courage to say, this is my life and I'm done giving it away. That's what emotional freedom feels like. Not loud, not chaotic, but steady. A quiet knowing that no one owns your mind, your emotions, or your destiny. You do. Always have. Always will. Let's be honest. Taking back your power isn't easy. It demands courage. It requires you to face every lie you've been told about who you are. Every voice that told you to stay small, to keep quiet, to be grateful for crumbs. But here's the truth. You were never meant to live your life walking on eggshells for the comfort of others. You were born to stand tall, to walk in your truth, to own your mind and your emotions without apology. The people who tried to control you, they didn't do it because you were weak. They did it because your strength scared them. Your empathy, your light, your integrity, that's what they wanted to contain. Because people who are whole, people who are awake, people who think and feel deeply, they can't be controlled. They see too clearly. And that's what you're becoming now. Someone who sees clearly. You've seen what manipulation looks like. You felt the sting of guilt tripping, the confusion of gaslighting, the suffocation of emotional control. But you've also discovered something more powerful: awareness. The moment you recognize those patterns, they began to lose their hold. You've learned that kindness without boundaries is weakness, that guilt is not proof of wrongdoing, and that peace is not found in silence. It's found in truth. You are not here to please. You are not here to perform. You are here to live fully, freely, fearlessly. You have a right to your emotions. You have a right to your voice. You have a right to your boundaries. No one gets to rewrite your story or dictate your worth. No one gets to use your empathy as a weapon against you. Taking back control means you stop living reactively and start living intentionally. It's when you stop giving your power to the people who drain you and start investing it in yourself. It's choosing calm over chaos, clarity over confusion, truth over comfort. It's knowing that not everyone will understand your boundaries. And that's okay. You're not building your life for their approval. You're building it for your peace. You are not who you were when you tolerated disrespect just to keep the peace. You are not who you were when you second-guessed your intuition or apologized for being too much. That version of you served a purpose. They kept you safe. But that version isn't your future. The real you, the one emerging right now, is stronger, wiser, calmer. You no longer chase validation. You create it within yourself. And yes, people will notice. Some will distance themselves because they can no longer manipulate you. Let them go. That's not loss. That's alignment. Every time someone leaves, because you refuse to abandon yourself, the universe makes room for people who will love you correctly. Those who see your boundaries as strength, not defiance. This is your reminder. You don't need to explain your healing. You don't need to justify your growth. The people meant for you will never require you to dim your light to make them comfortable. So as you walk away from the noise, remember this: peace is not found in control. It's found in surrender, not surrendering to others, but surrendering to truth. The truth that your emotions belong to you. Your choices belong to you. Your power belongs to you. From this day forward, don't let guilt silence you. Don't let kindness be your cage. Don't let fear write your story. Stand in your truth calmly, confidently, unapologetically, because when you do, something extraordinary happens. The people who once controlled your emotions fade into the background, and the person you were always meant to be steps forward. You don't owe anyone your compliance. You owe yourself your freedom. So lift your head, take a breath, and say it with conviction: no one owns me. No one defines me. I am in control of my peace, my power, and my purpose. That is not arrogance. That is sovereignty. That is self-respect. That is the life you've earned through awareness, courage, and healing. And as you walk forward, free, grounded, and clear. Remember, control is an illusion, but self-mastery is power. You've reclaimed your mind, your emotions, your truth. That's not just freedom. That's transformation. That's you, finally fully you.